was 17, I ran away from home and from everything I had ever known. I was sick and tired, living in a town filled with narrow minds and hate. They used to laugh at me, their children called me names.
Hello, thank you for tuning in to A Spoonful of Comfort. I'm Claudrine Jackson, your host for A Spoonful of Comfort, and I'm here to remind you and me that we all have a spoonful of comfort. And during these troubling political times, instead of us looking to our leaders for comfort, we should be able to comfort each other. So remember, you have a spoonful of comfort. A spoonful is the minimum of anything that you can give anyone. So a spoonful of medicine goes a long way. A spoonful of comfort can go a long way. This month is Black History Month. As you can see, I'm still decked out in African attire. I'm wearing the same hat that I wore last week, but today I'm wearing it the correct way, the way it's supposed to be worn. The purpose of this show, I want to talk about children with handicaps and the Purvis Jackson Autism Foundation. The Purvis Jackson Autism Foundation helps lower-income children with handicaps because Purvis Jackson Jr. is handicapped by autism, as you've heard me say before. So the foundation helps the children that slip through the cracks, lower-income, inner-city people that are invisible, that do not get help, and the Purvis Foundation is here to help them. I spoke about the starfish story before. In the starfish story, a man was walking along the beach and he was throwing starfish back into the water because if they're washed up on the beach, they will die if they're not thrown back into the water. So he was walking along the beach, picking up starfish, throwing them back into the water, and someone said to him, "Why are you doing that? It doesn't make a difference." And he picked one up and threw it back into the water, and he said it made a difference to that one. So that's the philosophy of the Purvis Foundation. We can't help everyone, but we can help someone, and we can make a difference to someone. So if you want to make a donation to the Purvis Foundation, you can reach us at P.O. Box 04422, Detroit 48204. Our website is pjjraf.org, where you can make a request for assistance if you need assistance. So one of my other purposes this month during Black History Month is to speak for my ancestors. We have ancestors that went through a lot of trials and tribulation to get us to the point where we are now. So I don't want us to forget them, and I want us to be grateful to them. I also want to remind you that if you're going through something, going through it means you're going through it. You're going to come out on the other side. So you always have faith that I'm going through this and I will get through it. And that works very well. But it didn't work for me, for my son, because I was told he's always going to be this way. There's not going to be a cure for him, and he will always have autism. So I thought, well, my method for getting through things is not working here because I can't get through this. But here, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, one of my favorite writers and preachers, and he started the Guidepost Publications. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale said, if you can't change your circumstances, change your attitude about your circumstances. So I did. I changed my attitude about my circumstances, and things got a lot better. They say a lot of your problems start in your mind. If you can make up your mind that you're going to do something, then you'll do it. When I made up my mind that I was going to accept autism, which I did not want to accept, when I made up my mind that I was going to accept autism, and I made up my mind that he needed a mother who was concerned about him, everything changed. So if you're going through something, remember that the Lord will make a way. One of my favorite gospel hymns, and one of the things that helped me through a lot of trials and tribulations when I was going through them was the Lord will make a way. I'm not going to sing it for you because I'm not the singer in the family, but I'll give you the words, which you probably already know. Like a ship that's tossed and driven and battered by an angry sea, when the storms of life are raging and the fury falls on me, I wonder just what I have done that makes my race so hard to run. Then I say to my soul, don't worry, the Lord will make a way somehow. So remember, the Lord will make a way somehow. I'm going to take a break in a minute, but before my break, I want to give you your comfort for today, which is Romans 12:2. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Your mind is capable of renewing itself. And so remember, you can change your thoughts. I know it's hard, but you can do that. John 14:27. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid, because peace I give to you. Psalm 55:22. Cast thy burdens on the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer a righteous person to be moved. So, trying to give you a little bit of comfort, I'm about to take a short break. When I come back from the break, we're going to delve into a little bit more Black history and speaking for our ancestors. So thank you so much for tuning in to A Spoonful of Comfort. You can find me here at 1:30 on Tuesdays on WHPR in Highland Park. Thank you.
When I was 17, I ran away from home and from everything I had ever known. I was sick and tired, living in a town filled with narrow minds and hate. They used to laugh at me, their children called me names. I would run and hide, feeling so ashamed just for being born. I was just a boy, punished for a crime that was not mine. Life ain't so easy when you're a ghetto child. Oh, baby, life ain't so easy when you're...
Welcome back. I hope you're staying tuned. I said that I was speaking for my ancestors some during Black History Month. So I want to start in Africa, where we were brought, from which we were brought to this country. It started in Dakar, Senegal, in an island off the coast of Senegal, which is on the west coast of Africa. And there's the Door of No Return, which was our last stop in Africa before we came to this country. The Door of No Return is now a museum, and it's called the Museum of Slaves. And the Museum of Slaves is a recognition of where our last stop was. And if you can go to the Charles A. Wright Museum of African American History right here in Detroit, you will see a replica of a slave ship, a replica of a slave ship. And it shows how the slaves were brought here. We were in the bottom of the ship, and we were laying in spoon fashion. And a lot of people didn't make it because if there was an illness or something, of course, it knocked out a lot of people, and a lot of people weren't able to make it here. But it was survival of the fittest. It was the healthiest and strongest people who did make it here. Also, if you can go to the Detroit Historical Museum, you can see the Underground Railroad. We talked about Harriet Tubman some last week and the Underground Railroad. It it takes you on a journey as if you're a slave and you're whispering and you're going through the woods and you're hiding out. And then at the end of the journey, you get to um, Canada. You get to the Detroit River, which is taking you to Canada, which was our last stop on the Underground Railroad. And speaking of the Underground Railroad, I want to remind you of, I want to talk some about Frederick Douglass. Now, Frederick Douglass was a black slave who learned how to read before it was legal for us to read. One of the slave master's wives taught him how to read. And when he learned how to read, he escaped and came up north. He went to Massachusetts, where he was writing in the Massachusetts anti-slavery. He was considered an abolitionist, trying to abolish slavery. And then he wrote a book about his bondage, but he was so afraid for his safety that he left and went to England. He stayed in England for years, but then when he came back to this country, he decided that he was still going to keep writing. He left this country because he was afraid of all that he was writing. So he still wrote about abolishing slavery, and he started a newspaper called the North Star, which was about abolishing slavery. He moved to Rochester, New York, and he became a stop on the Underground Railroad. His home became one of the stops on the Underground Railroad. He was also one of the people that met with Abraham Lincoln to discuss slavery. So we owe a debt to Frederick Douglass. And like I say, I'm trying to recognize some of our ancestors that made things easier for us. I'm going to talk about Barack Obama, who is still living and still making black history. So you know who Obama was, who Obama is, but he's still busy. He has the Barack Obama Foundation. And one of the things that he said is, we must be the change that we want to see. And he also said, we must give expression to our best hopes, not our deepest fears. So he was a great inspiration. He still is a great inspiration. What the Barack Obama Foundation is doing is training young people to go into politics and to be our future leaders. And if any of them turn out as well as he did, it's a good mission for him to have, and I'm glad he has the vision and the mission to do that. Now, Barack Obama was presidential. There was no scandal, no nothing when he was president that you could say he wasn't presidential. One of our news people said that he was a statesman, and a statesman is different from a politician. So Barack Obama was a statesman. Barack Obama is a statesman. I also want to talk about Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes was a playwright, novelist, social activist, and he wrote a wonderful play called A Raisin in the Sun, which is still relevant today. But I want to share with you one of his poems. It's called A Dream Deferred. A Dream Deferred by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Some of his dreams, I'm sure, came true because he was a successful playwright and a successful poet. And some of the poems that he wrote and some of the things that he wrote, I, consider myself a writer, but he is something to aspire to. Another person that I want to remind you of, I talked about him last week, Paul Laurence Dunbar, who was the first poet that I ever really knew about. And I recited to you last week part of the party which was his one of his poems. And the party was the first poem that I learned that I still remember today. And Paul Laurence Dunbar was a social activist and a writer, and the people that were able to rise above their circumstances and accomplish something deserve our recognition, and they deserve to hear, for us to hear what they did and to have some of their words resurrected, because they were very important to our history. I want to share a poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar, which is one of my favorite poems by him, one of my favorite poems of all time. And this is just referred to as a Negro love song. I'm going to try to speak it in the dialect that he wrote it in, because everything that Paul Laurence Dunbar wrote was in dialect. Seen my lady home last night. Jump back, honey, jump back. Held her hand and squeezed her tight. Jump back, honey, jump back. Heard her sigh a little sigh. Seen a light gleam in her eye. And a smile go flinting by. Jump back, honey, jump back. Heard the wind blow through the pines. Jump back, honey, jump back. Mockingbird was singing fine. Jump back, honey, jump back. And my heart was beating so when I reached my lady's door that I couldn't bear to go. Jump back, honey, jump back. Put my arms around her waist. Jump back, honey, jump back. Raised her lips and took a taste. Jump back, honey, jump back. Love me, honey, love me true. Love me well as I love you. And she answered, course I do. Jump back, honey, jump back. So you can see why Langston Hughes, this is Dunbar. Langston Hughes was a dream deferred. Paul Laurence Dunbar, you can see why Paul Laurence Dunbar was so well known even back in those days. And his writing, he was not one of the people that wrote a lot about social activism, but his writing over 150 years ago, and it still resonates today. So we should be proud of our history. We weren't allowed to read until 1863, when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And we have accomplished a great deal in those years since then. And there's still a lot that needs to be accomplished. You know, I talked about Martin Luther King and his I Had a Dream. I have a dream. And when we thought we had achieved the dream, and we really thought we had achieved the dream when Barack Obama was elected president, then we found that we still have work to do for that dream to come true. So those of us who are willing to speak out, remember, we are speaking out for our ancestors, because they are the ones that paved the way for us to be able to speak. I also talked about Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker was a black woman who used lotions and potions and concoctions and made hair pomade for women. She made things for women to use on their hair, which was very important, and it's still important to me. But Madam C.J. Walker was the first black millionaires. And some of her products, I don't know if they're still being used, but some of her products were the basis for products that are still being used today. Now, I mentioned the Detroit Historical Museum and the Underground Railroad exhibit, but if you do go to the Detroit Historical Museum, try to go to the Kid Rock Music Lab there also. The Kid Rock Music Lab was established by Kid Rock. He gave them the money to establish it, and it's about the history of music in Detroit. And there are some of my husband's things there. There's the gold record. There's a Grammy nomination. There's pictures of the Spinners. There's a costume that was not the Spinners costume, but uh, there's a lot about Motown there. But Motown wasn't the only music history in Detroit, which is why the uh, Music Lab is an interesting place to visit. It's also interactive. You can do your own recordings there. You can sing along with the artist. So it's a very worthwhile visit. And if you go to the Detroit Historical Museum, you can also have lunch. So you can see the Underground Railroad exhibit. You can see the Kid Rock exhibit. Also, there's a wonderful Streets of Old Detroit, where it's just like what Detroit used to be. So that's a worthy outing, a worthy place for you to go. I'm about to take another short break, but what I want to remind you to have faith and be positive, and to keep your optimism going, because you can hope for the best just like you can expect the worst. And hoping for the best is much better than expecting the worst, because the Lord will make a way somehow. I'm going to take a short break. I will be back and wrap this up. But I hope you're learning something about Black history. Hope you're learning something about your history. Hope that you are inspired by some of the words of our ancestors that I felt bared repeating and resurrecting, and that we needed to recognize. So I'll be back in a minute, and see you on the other side of the break. Stick and stay, and don't go away.
When I was 17, I ran away from home and from everything I had ever known. I was sick and tired, living in a town filled with narrow minds and hate. They used to laugh at me, their children called me names. I would run and hide, feeling so ashamed just for being born.
I want to remind you again about success. Success is not a destination. Success is a journey. The doing of something is just as important, or maybe more important, than the final outcome. Now, that's one of the statements from Arthur Ashe. That's one of my favorite statements that he made. And when you're looking for success, if that's all you want is the success, then what are you doing along the way? That's one of my guiding principles in doing this TV show. This is my journey doing this show, my journey to help people with handicaps, my journey to resurrect some of our ancestors. I want you to remember my book, Inspired by Autism. I want you to remember my other book, Let There Be Light. These are books of poems that one is a book of poems. The other is a book about my experiences raising my son who has autism. I was inspired by Langston Hughes and Paul Laurence Dunbar and people that have accomplished a great deal. Remember, tune in on 1:30 Tuesdays to WHPR TV 33 in Highland Park, Michigan. I want to thank R.J. Watkins and Henry Tyler for giving us a forum from which we can speak. And remember, if you need help from the Purvis Foundation, you can reach us at pjjraf.org. You can reach me at Jackson Claudrine CLAUDREEN at sbcglobal.net. Until next time, may the power of God protect you, and may the love of God enfold you. And I will see you, or you will see me, next Tuesday, hopefully. Take care of yourself.
When I was 17, I ran away from home and from everything I had ever known. I was sick and tired, living in a town filled with narrow minds and hate. They used to laugh at me, their children called